ॐ सदाशिवसमारम्भां शङ्कराचार्यमध्यमाम् अस्मदाचार्यपर्यन्तां वन्दे गुरुपरम्पराम्। ॐ सहना भवतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। ॐ so uh, yeah, welcome everyone. Today, instead of our usual Gita Satsanga, we'll just be discussing the Jiva Yatra. What a Jiva encounters after leaving the body. And Nikita, you had this question, and I figured we can take this occasion. So, do you mind if I share?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, are there any particular questions that you had in mind that you wanted to frame, or should I just give a general overview and then get into questions if you have?
Yeah. So what I wanted was to just touch base with what it is I should have learned when we started Vedanta, understanding the true nature of ourselves, to remind myself of that if ever I find myself grieving, right? Um, and then apart from that, I wanted to know what happens to the jiva when it leaves the body. And also, in terms of rituals, I don't know how much different is it from between India and Trinidad.
Yeah. So I think we can start with the latter part, and then you'll see that the former sort of gets taken care of. So, what, in terms of like ritualistic differences between Sanatana Dharma as followed in mainland Bharat versus, outside satellites, it would just be, few customs that would differ, but ultimately the source of everything is the Vedic teachings, the Veda Shastras, and then also some of the related texts. You have the Dharma Shastras, and then you have certain Puranas. I think we spoke about this, that the Vishnu, no, no, I'm sorry, the Garuda Purana goes into tremendous detail about the Jiva's journey after leaving the body. And then there are certain things which are very common. You have the cremation, you have the 13-day period of both mourning as well as of prayers and other rituals that one is supposed to perform. Pindadanam, all of these things are there. And then, yearly, there is this whole Shad ceremony where you offer food to the departed. One can even do Tarpanam, and then you also have different charities. All of these things are part and parcel of the uh, tradition, which are common, I would say, in all parts of the world, as long as people are Hindus. So, any regional differences would just be very minor, and not substantial. So, you know, the teaching of Sanatana Dharma culminates in Vedanta. And what Vedanta says is that this whole Jagat, you, me, everybody here, everybody else that we know who are with us, who are not with us, ultimately, it is all having its basis in Ishvara. All that is there is Ishvara. And all the names and forms that we identify with, that we identify as, that we relate to, are nothing but Ishvara. So there's one, shloka, Akashat Patitam Toyam Sagaram Prati Gachati Sarvadeva Namaskaro Keshavam Prati Gachati. So, just as the rain falls Akashat from the sky, Patitam Toyam, so the raindrops that fall from the sky, Sagaram Prati Gachati, they go towards the ocean. In the same way, all the jivas, which are nothing but names and forms that we are as individuals, to be upon the the end of everything, whether you call it the end of the body, you call it the end of the universal cycle, the cosmic cycle. Even from that perspective, everything goes back to Ishvara. Yeah, so what because I wanted to advise a little bit on this particular question since you asked, and so even the emphasis of Adi Shankaracharya, the great teacher of Vedanta who gave us all of these commentaries that we base our entire teaching on. He has also emphasized that all that is there, we talk about the rituals and the different models of karma and such, are only in the recognition of the fact that there is nothing other than Ishvara Brahman. Whether we get into the technicalities of, you call it Shaguna Brahma, you call it Nirguna Brahma, doesn't matter. Brahman is Brahman. We don't create that distinction. There are certain schools which stress upon that, but we don't. And the reason I'm saying this is that ultimately there is no death. There is also, from that context, there is also no life. And this sounds like a little bit of a contradiction because we are talking over here and we are very much alive and here to have this conversation. But if you think about it, both life and death are degrees of sentience that are expressed. And one very um, appropriate example that comes to mind are sand dunes. So if you visit a vast desert, think of the Sahara, for instance, then you will see these massive sand dunes. They are stacked next to each other, and there are the whole desert is sprawled with these never-ending sand dunes, and they seem to be connected to each other, they're like friends almost, and they're just waiting there. And then you think that okay, they are pretty much unchanging. But then you come back after a few days or after a few weeks or after a few years, and those two sand dunes are no longer in their same location. In fact, they've evolved, they've changed. Because small particles of sand continue to erode and leave that sand dune. And in its place comes something else, and it also shifts because it shifts with the wind. So the sand dune move in the direction of the wind as well. And so in some sense, these sand dunes are like people in the way that we as bodies are also sand dunes because we are comprised of these cells as bodies, just as the sand dunes are comprised of grains of sand. And constantly we shed these cells, but then new cells are also generated based on the food we consume and so on. And at some point, what ends up happening is, a sand dune is no longer a dune anymore. It's just a small mound at that point, where it loses the majority of its grains, sand grains. In the same way, as the human body ages, as it falls sick, as it starts to decompose, the regenerative faculties cannot keep up with the deterioration of our cells, and eventually that's what we call old age or sickness, and ultimately that leads to what we call physical death. And so that is how I would even look at the body, that it's just a sand dune. It changes in time. It appears to be constant in the moment, but we are constantly going through a phase of metamorphosis, and in some dreary morbid sense, we are dying every second of our life a little bit, because a little bit is fading away, a little bit of our essence is fading away. It doesn't appear that way in the next 5 seconds, but after 5 years you will find your energy has faded quite a bit, right? And I today I was playing tennis with Ambika, and my vitality, how it used to be when I was in my 20s, was very different. I don't have the same capacity to run across the length of the court anymore. I still have the stroke because you have to move a lot, but I don't have that stamina to run across any longer. I mean, this is what life is all about. That it's just a fact that we have to deal with. And so, in this whole teaching, what we are taught is that which is born always will die, and that which has never experienced birth can also never die. So, if the body is born, it will be gone, and that which is unborn, which is the self, the Atma, there is no birth for it. It is Anjanma, and therefore there is no Mrityu for that which is Ajanma. And the only thing that is Ajanma is this, the self, not the body, the self. This is a very beautiful story. I might have said this maybe a year, maybe 2 years back. I don't remember exactly, but it was during a satsanga. The Bhagavad Gita home study that we are doing, it is based on a series of talks by Pujya Swamiji, delivered about, I would say, almost 40 years ago. And not every single incident that is relayed during those talks are covered in the home study text, because there were certain guest acharyas who would also come and stay at the Gurukulam, and at times Pujya Swamiji would always ask the the visitors, the great Mahatmas who visited the ashram, oftentimes it was his students themselves to say a few words at the end of a given chapter, or maybe to share their experience with the studies and the what they have gained from the teaching. So there was one sannyasi, one Mahatma who was featured as a guest teacher, lecturer. And so he started off by saying that he came to Pujya Swamiji as a brahmachari, and he wanted to do some service to the Gurukulam, to the Guru. And so the task that was assigned to him was essentially to help do seva in the kitchen, clean Puja Swamiji's utensils, and just prepare and serve him food and things like that. Because again, the seva is not for the sake of the guru; it is for the sake of the student. The guru doesn't require this, but the purification that one receives as a student is part and parcel of that Gurukulam Nivas, to be able to stay and serve the acharya. It's a privilege. So Puja Swamiji went. Sorry, not Puja Swamiji. This brahmachari one day, Puja Samji was in his kutia, and there were some students who visited him from abroad, and they brought him this very expensive dinner set made of Swarovski crystal. So it was very delicate and very exquisite. And they offered it to Puja Samji. This we just brought this for you. You may, in case you want to use it for your meals. So then what happened is this brahmachari was very intimidated looking at this dinner set, because it was made of very thin glass, and it didn't seem to be that sturdy. So what happened is he took it to wash in the kitchen, and in his nervousness he dropped like the first cup, and so the glass shattered, and he became even more nervous. And so he dropped the second cup, then he dropped the Swarovski dinner plate, and then ultimately the whole set was finished because each one got him more and more nervous than the other. So then what happened is he wanted to confess. So he went and then he knocked Puja Swamiji's door. And he's like, Swamiji, may I come in? So yeah, Swamiji said, yeah, sure. And then he came and he was all like ashen faced. So Puja Swamiji said, what happened? He said, Swamiji, I committed a grave error. So he said, what? He said, you remember those that the dinner set that XYZ gentleman gave you? I dropped all of them. I got nervous and they all broke one by one. So Puja Samji only smiled. And then he said only one statement. What can broke, broke. That's it. Now you interpret the rest, because that's what this person did, right? This brahmachari contemplated upon that statement, because Puja Samji won't say something unless it is very deeply meaningful. And everybody who has spent any time in Puja Samji will see this. So what can break, broke. Now where does that apply? It applies to the dinner plates. It applies to somebody's home. It applies to somebody's health. It applies to somebody's finances. It applies to a relationship. Because even if the relationship doesn't break while one is together, then it breaks when the person is no longer there. So what does it not apply to? It applies to the earth. The earth is one day going to be swallowed by the sun. We know this. 5 billion years. Don't count, but it's a long time, but it's going to happen. Then one day the sun will be gone. One day the earth will be gone. The solar system will no longer exist. One day the galaxies will, just disintegrate. Ultimately, even matter and even the tiniest electrons will decompose. I don't know the exact number, but I think it is like 150 something billion, trillion years, whatever that number is. Then even the electron will stop being an electron. In other words, the whole Jagat will unmanifest. It will unravel. So there is nothing in this whole blessed world, the whole cosmos, however you want to define the cosmos, universe, multiverse, megaverse, whatever you want expression you use, it's all Jagat. Jagat is one word we use for it. And this whole Jagat is breakable. And therefore, what can break, broke. And it will break. And this is the story of the human life as well. If you take it at a very small scale, in time scale, it's a wave. Sometimes you see two waves that they are together, and then the waves again get submerged and separate. If you look at it at a higher time scale, it's the sand dunes. A slightly higher time scale, it's the human beings. A slightly lower time scale, maybe it is the human species. Higher than that, maybe it is life on Earth. Higher than that, maybe it is our planet. Higher than that, our galaxy. Higher than that, ultimately everything will decompose. It's just a matter of how you're defining your time scale. A little more, a little less. That's it. But in the face of a word like infinity, no matter how long a time scale is, it is always infinitely small. So that is how life is. It comes, it goes. It comes and it goes. And that is the import of recognizing that what can break, broke. And that which cannot break will always be. Because that which can break has a certain constituency, right? It's constituted of different things. Think about it. Anything that can break means it can be divided, it can be broken, it can be made partite because it is partite. The human body is made of different limbs. You take away a limb, it's broken. Cell is also made of different structures. You break those apart, and cell is dead. That's how cells die. When the the protoplasm starts kind of like coming out and the cell walls start decomposing, the cell dies. That's how cancer kills cells. So ultimately, what can break is that which is partite, and what is not subject to breaking is impartite, and that is the cell. And what do you mean by impartite? Does not have parts, does not have quality, does not have attribute, which is the same as quality. I repeated myself. So it is nirguna. It is guna rahita, without any quality. Because the moment you define a quality, you have limited it. The quality is a limitation. Some people think that the more qualities you have, the more limitless you are. That is not true. It's the opposite. The more qualities you have, the more you're limited by them. The limitless sustains all qualities without being colored by those qualities. That is the beauty. See, Shastra is not meant to make one dissociate with the world of names and forms. It is meant to integrate, uphold the world of names and forms as having their basis in the self. So this is a very important distinction that Pujya Swamiji emphasized on, that don't dissociate, associate happily, without knowing that I am not the one who's associating, because even the one who associates is a name and form. The person, the individual is a name and form. Okay, so this is the context in which we understand what is life, what is death, and it's a circle. It's a circle of life. So now in this process, now if we get into the specific details of what happens, typically, as we said, death happens to the body, not to the self. And that had to happen. If not today, after a year, after 10 years, after 20 years, we are all going to die. One day people will be looking at this chat and we are all gone. Okay. So that will happen. When a person dies, when the body falls, what happens is there is a Sukshma Sharira. The Sukshma Sharira, for simplicity, let's call it the Jiva. Okay, we'll call it the Jiva for now. This Jiva um, is is also known as a subtle body. We've spoken about this in Tattva, so I'm not going to get into the details of that. The body houses the Sukshma Sharira. The physical body houses the Sukshma Sharira. The Sukshma Sharira expresses through the body. The vitality that we have, what we call the prana Shakti, you can breathe, you can eat, you can exercise, you can move around, you can think. All of this is movement that is taking place within the body. There's blood that's flowing, there's air that's flowing, there's waste food that's flowing. This whole body is in constant motion on the inside. This physiological set of processes that keep the body alive are driven by the prana. The prana are the vitality, the force that keeps everything going. It is the motor, and it's like the engine, really. And the body is like the vehicle, but the prana is the engine. And the Sukshma Sharira is, in some sense, you can call it the fuel. But again, I don't want to, maybe it's not a great analogy to use, because the prana itself is part of the Sukshma Sharira, but it interfaces with the body. Does that make sense? The interface. For example, if you have a mouse, the mouse interfaces with your computer programs and your hand. Your computer programs and your hand are connected through the interface that you call a desktop or a mouse or keyboard. So these are interfaces. And what happens is the Sukshma Sharira by itself cannot express into the physical world. Therefore, it needs a Sthula Sharira to express. This Sthula Sharira is able to think, it's able to decide, it's able to feel, it's able to rationalize, it's able to plan. All of these things are processes of the mind, what the modern scientist will call the processes of the brain, but it's actually the mind. The brain is only the organ of expression through which the mind is able to manifest itself as a sentient entity. So what happens is when the body is ill, when the physical body is no longer able to support the presence of the Sukshma Sharira, that interface starts fading away. And what happens is that the prana start folding back into themselves. So slowly, what happens is right now, as one has more vitality, the prana shakti is more predominant. As one gets ill, when a person, let's say for example, throws up, or when they have fever, or when they have some sort of vomiting or diarrhea or whatever it is, the apana, if it's diarrhea, the apana shakti starts getting more predominant. When you're vomiting, maybe it might be the udana shakti, the prana, the udana prana, not the shakti. And then this ultimately, all the pranas fold up into the udana. And this udana prana, it the, it becomes, it creates a thrust through which the Sukshma Shrira gets drawn out of the body and it departs the physical body. And that is what you call death of the physical body. When the prana leaves the body, with the Udana prana, or Udana prana being the predominant force over here. Okay, so now the Sukshma Shrira comes out, and depending on which nadi, so nadis are internal, not physical, but they are subtle channels through which the prana shakti flows. So if you see, there are certain kriyas that we have in our tradition. I don't know if anybody has experienced it, but sometimes if you're like deeply focused in a certain part of the body, you might feel throbbing. Anybody has felt a sensation like that in any part of the body? It will happen if you continue to focus there, and that is all the prana shakti that starts flowing through a certain nadi. Now, depending on which nadi, through which nadi the prana shakti, the prana and the sukshma sharira along with it exits the body, that determines the new location of the jiva, where the jiva is going to end up. Okay, so this is and then here we are not talking about me, we are talking about all of us, most of us, right? Like in the world, the majority of the people in the world are not jnanis, and so we assume that almost everybody, with the exception of a very few people, will be born again in some form, in some way, etc. So now, when the Sukma Shreya leaves, the physical body is um, it's as sentient as a rock, which is another way of saying it is not sentient at all. The physical processes in the body come to a halt. The heart stops beating. The brain is no longer um, uh, passing electric currents from one neuron to the other. And so at this point, the physical body is just a shell. It is not sentient any longer. But then there is this jiva which has departed the physical body just moments ago. And for the next 10, 11, 12, 13 days during that period, the the Sukshma Sharira is still somewhere in a liminal state. I don't know how to explain it best, but it is like a dreamlike state where it is a body made of thought. It's not physical, like you can't touch it, you can't hold it. No, it's just it has the same reality as a thought, which is it has a certain reality, but it is very subtle and it's in a liminal state. So, sometimes when you have a dream, in fact, if you recall a certain event from a dream, you can replay the dream back. Like if you see somebody entering a room, you can even see that same scene again because you want to experience the same thing again, and you see these things happening. So that is like a very liminal state. In the real world, doesn't not the real, but the physical world does not work that way. But in a dream, like these permutations are possible. So anyway, what happens is this jiva has departed. It's outside, but there is still a certain attachment that is there with the family, with the even with the body itself. In some instances, there could be like a state of confusion also. Like, wait, how wait, what just happened? Like, I'm seeing this thing that I recognize to be myself, but it's on the floor, and like, what is happening, right? So sometimes some people encounter that in, especially in instances when it's called akala mrityu, like an accident or a sudden death, or getting hit by lightning or a car crash, where suddenly the person's dead and like they don't see that coming at all, right? And so in those instances, that kind of death is considered very difficult to deal with, even for the sharira that has departed, the sukshma sharira that has departed, because it actually doesn't understand what just happened. And one has to do certain special karmas for such a kind of death, which one did not see coming at all. Completely like in a second you're gone, like that kind of thing. Now, uh, in other instances, what happens is the body lingers around familiar locations, around family, around loved ones, around the place where the body is kept also. That is why in our Hindu tradition, we very quickly perform the cremation within a few days, because you don't want to torture the physical, you don't want to torture the departed jiva by having them linger around the body. You want to break that connection as soon as possible. Yes.
Okay, so I have a bit of confusion when we talk about the jiva and it feeling tormented. So, from my understanding, if the jiva shouldn't have any feelings, right? I don't know if we're interpreting anything wrong.
The jiva doesn't always feel tormented, but there will be an initial state of confusion. And in terms of not having any feelings, the all feelings reside in the sukshma sharira, not in the physical body, but in the sukshma sharira itself. And so, what you feel, what you think, how you analyze, this is all functions of the sukshma sharira. Manaha and buddhi and ahankar, chittani, all of these together come together, and they are responsible for the emotional personality, the intellectual personality, all of these things together. So the body does not feel. The body is only a vehicle. It's like if you're in a car, and if there's an accident, you as the owner are going to feel the pain, not the car. And so the same way, all feelings and all pain is actually processed, even if it's a bodily pain, is processed in the mind, not in the body. Otherwise, if a body were to feel pain, try to, poke like a dead animal or something, and you'll see that it doesn't feel anything because the feeling is there in the mind, not in the body. So the emotions are still there in the jiva, but it has taken up, like I said, like it 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 has taken up a sort of a form. Some people may call it a preta sharira. In instances where it lingers on for longer than necessary, but in other instances, there's a body called, I think it's called jalpa, or I don't know exactly, but it's made of predominantly watery element. Like how our physical bodies are made of prithvi pradhana, they are predominantly made of the earth element, the prithvi pradhana, and the dev shariras are made of agni pradhana. They are like bodies made of light, so to speak. And that way, pretas and bhutas are like ghosts and these spirits. They are made of vayu pradhana elements. All the bhutas are there, but it's vayu pradhana. And this body sometimes, when it's in transit between one station to another station, it takes up this watery sort of pradhana, like, like jal pradhana. I don't know the exact details over here because again, like I've not studied this intensely or intently rather, and but I can always follow up on that. So yeah, for 10 to 12 days, it does linger around family. And the more pujas and rituals and mantras that you recite and you participate in these activities, it benefits the departed jiva because they get a lot of punya by being exposed to these things as well, and it gives them certain closure also. Now, this is a true story from Sri Akhandananda Swamiji's life. He had spoken about it. Somebody spoke about it. Swami Pratik Budhanji, I believe, spoke about this incident that occurred to one of his gurus, who was also Puja Swamiji and Akhandanandaji, both of them. Um, there was one Marwadi boy who had died in Mumbai or somewhere. I don't know if it was Mumbai, but in India, let's call it. And what happened is one day this Maharashi ji, Swami Akhandananda ji, was giving a talk, pravachan on the Bhagavad Purana, and there was this auditorium full of people, but he kept looking at a certain corner, an empty corner, and he addressed the entire pravachan almost looking at an empty place. Then what happened is people will eventually asked him that, Swamiji, why were you looking there? And then he said that, there was somebody who recently passed away, and before this 10-12 day whatever period uh, ended, they wanted to listen to the teachings of Bhagwan one proper time, like in a final way. And so I was just addressing and fulfilling that wish. And so the person actually in that sukshma form, because when you are at the level of a great Mahatma, you're able to see that as well. And it's not through your physical eyes, but it's through the mind's eye. And so he delivered the pravachan, and the person who had died recently heard that pravachan. They felt that okay, they are free to move on, and they got that resolution. They got the thing that they were looking for. So the more one keeps these things on, keep japa on, keep some mantras on. Um, some people, I don't know if this is common across all Hindu traditions, but some traditions also put a glass of water, and they also put a diya, one lit prataya hua diya lamp, and they put it next to the water. And this is again, for the comfort of the jiva. So that is one thing that a person can do. And so then, it talks about different lokas that the person can go to. And like I said, that it really, where you'll end up will depend on which nadi you're living through. Now, let's start with the highest, right? Like the most desirable state, which is you go through the um, uh, Shukla Gati. So it's called the Shukla Gati, or it's basically the path of Krama Mukti. Has anybody heard of Krama Mukti in any context? Jivan Mukti. Jivan Mukti is essentially when jnana is gained, Jivan Mukti is assured at the end of the life. See, jnana nishtha happens while you're alive. Moksha happens while you're alive, not after you die. You're free while living because now you're living as a free person. But Jivan Mukti also happens while alive. But then there is something called Videha Mukti. Videha Mukti means the body also falls away, and then there's no place the person has to go because everything is the whole. And therefore, the cycle of birth and death is birth or death for this person. So that is Videha Mukti. There's something just slightly inferior to Videha Mukti called Krama Mukti, which, as even Pujya Swamiji points out, is ironically harder to achieve. And what is Krama Mukti? Krama Mukti means the next Janma after this one is guaranteed to be the final Janma. But that Janma, in order for it to be guaranteed to be the final Janma, cannot be in a place like Prithvi Loka, Bhuloka. It cannot be in a place like Devaloka. where you experience untold pleasures. It cannot also be in a place like Pitraloka, where you are very calm and content, and you are, so to speak, hanging out with your Pitrus, your ancestors. And it obviously cannot be in a place like Naraka, right? Because obviously, right, there's nothing to explain. But this Krama Mukti is in a special. It happens. It takes you to a special place called Brahmaloka. Anybody heard of Brahmaloka? Brahmaloka is the highest realm that a jiva can experience in the entire jagat. Brahmaloka is the ultimate. Um, I guess it is far beyond any form of swarga as well. Even in swarga, you will still be battered about by likes and dislikes. Of course, mostly pleasurable experiences, but still, your insecurities and all will still play out in swarga as well. But Brahmaloka is a subtle realm. It is not having the same level of gross physicality as some of the other realms. So, like Bhuloka would be relatively gross. Gross, not in as in disgusting, but gross as in, I guess, more tangible, so I suppose. Um, Naraka would also be gross. Um, then Swarga would have different levels of grossification there, because the body is made of tej pradhana. Therefore, Swarga will be a bit more subtle. But when you talk about Brahmaloka, it is Hiranyagarbha itself. Hiranyagarbha is a sukshma totality, and it is the underlying basis of all the physical realms that we have heard of. But Brahmaloka itself has its basis in Brahman or Ishvara. Okay? But it is, you can say, the subtlest realm. And that totality, that is Hiranyagarbha, the Sukshma Shrira goes there in very subtle form, and it is exposed to the teaching of Brahma Vidya from none other than Brahmaji, Chaturmukh Brahmaji, who is manifested itself as Hiranyagarbha, but also within Hiranyagarbha has manifested as a teacher of Brahma Vidya. And there will be a nice, long, comfortable matlab, like, it's not that you have to sit there also. Your body is also not ordinary anymore. It's made of pure just thought. It's just a thought body really. And that person goes there. And in order to go to Brahmaloka, you have to, we are not going there as a guarantee. You have to spend like one third of your life, one third, okay, of your waking life, not your sleeping life, your waking life in Upasana, one third of your life in some form of charity, one third of your life in, proper rituals and, all sorts of like injunctions that you have to follow to the letter. If you do it perfectly, then you will ascend to Brahmaloka. That is Karma Mukti. And in Brahmaloka, after a long spell of exposure to the Vedantic teachings, because you've attained so much Chitta Shuddhi, but maybe that teaching of Brahma Vidya was remaining, that teaching comes from Brahmaji. And that is the final goodbye present, and you are never coming back. But Brahmaloka span itself is a very, very long time. This the lifespan of the universe, probably longer than that also. So this is Krama Mukti, highest. And then if a person has been a total, like, dishonest and despicable person who's just caused pain and pain to others, then you are the very opposite, which is you go to Naraka. And in Naraka, all sorts of, nasty things happen to one. If anybody has played these video games, you keep respawning there. So Naraka, like these demonic beings will keep like poking you and choking you, and there'll be like flying, monsters and snakes and pits of lava and cold ice, and you'll just be like tortured. And then the body dies, it'll be again, it'll die, again, it'll respawn. It'll keep respawning for a long time. And then that pap karma will burn out, and then that jiva will be born again somewhere better place most likely. And then you have these in between realms, like where we are right now. There is some pleasure, there is some pain, there is some joy, there is some sorrow, there is something to look forward to, there is something to dread. It's a mixture of happiness and sorrow. This world that we are in. um, I should rephrase it. It's not a mixture of happiness and sorrow because that depends on one's own state of mind as well. For instance, a Jivan Mukta would not feel that. It is replete with experiences that have the potential to cause happiness and sorrow, is a better way to phrase it. Because it has a potential to do that. Now, depending on, Puja Swamiji once said that, we all feel pain, that is compulsory, but we have a choice whether to feel sorrow. Sorrow is a choice, pain is a compulsion. So, sorrow is a choice. And okay, so this is I guess just a very broad understanding of like what happens to the jiva once it departs. And then based on the prarabdha karma, it is reborn in a different body. There is no saying where a body may be reborn. We have no way of knowing that. Sometimes you can look at your own charts, your own jyotisha um, um, kundali here, and you can determine to some degree if you are going to a very good jyotisha where you might have been in a previous life, perhaps. But there is no way that you can determine where somebody is going. And that's because the result is a consequence of past actions. But we don't know. And then where does the result show? It shows in a kundli. The kundli is the blueprint of the results of our prarabdha karma. But because we don't know what prarabdha karma the jiva has been allotted to the next life, we have no way of knowing where a person is, where a person is gone, etc. And so all we can do is at that point pray for the well-being of the departed and pray for their blessings also because that is very powerful. And take up a certain ritual. It could be something like you're offering arghya to Surya Devta, but you also offer it simultaneously to the Pitrus. And then you offer, like I do this every morning. Like I'll offer like to Surya Devta, I'll offer it to Ishvara as a whole, but also aspects of Ishvara, right? Like your Pitrus are an aspect of Ishvara. Surya Deva is an aspect of Ishvara. My like departed grandparents are an aspect of Ishvara. So I'll offer it to different aspects of Ishvara, asking them to empower me with their virtues as well. And when I did this over the course of the last year, my last grandparent passed away, and I was very sad, obviously, because we lived very close together. We were only 2 miles apart. Pretty much when I was growing up, 2 kilometers in fact, not even 2 miles. And yeah, so I figured that okay, how can I make them a part of me as an individual? See, we have to keep the atma aside, right? We're talking about the individual. So the way to make them a part of you is to remember what they stood for, remember the best of their qualities, and allow those qualities to percolate through our being, and then pass it down to our children also, because we are ultimately a collection of everything that our grandparents, great grandparents, etc., have done. We are here because they were, and therefore a part of them is in us. It's a genetic part for sure, but there's also something deeper, I believe. I think there's something deeper than just biology over here. I think there is something that we all carry from our ancestry. Sometimes it could be a virtue, sometimes it could be a vice, sometimes it could be a madness, sometimes it could be some great tapasya, whatever it is. But I feel we carry something in our genetic lineage. I don't exactly know why, but it feels that way. And the more you tap into that lineage, the more it will express itself through you, the good qualities. So that is something to do. I think keeping the memory of ancestors alive is very much a part of our tradition. We are very blessed to have all of these Pitru karmas and yearly occasions of Shraddh and Pindadanam and all of these things. So we should not give them up. I guess that's all I really had to share, but I'm happy to take questions.
I don't think I have any questions now that we talk about it. I mean, all I could do now is just contemplate on everything that we talk about, just to keep myself in Well, I say in safe space, but I know not to bottle it up and as you say, let it flow.
Let it flow.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's been what, less than 12 days now, right? So it- you still take the opportunity to stay connected with your mom, and take that opportunity because you have time, and you can do some prayers. You can even offer them to Ishvara. I think, in a way that you're both offering it together. And your mom's around there, your location, because it's a thought. And then, if the Jiva thinks of a person, they're there. They show up because we have to travel physically from point A to point B. A thought is not limited by even the speed of light. A thought is a thought, and it's instantaneous. And so that is how you know you keep the memory alive, and you keep the person beside you. And then after a couple of weeks, slowly, you allow them to also find their new life, because that's what they want to do ultimately, and that's what you want for them. So, but yeah, nurture this moment, and don't hold back. Like, whatever you feel, share it, write it down. Writing helps. Sometimes planting a tree in somebody's memory is, I think, a very good practice. Maybe it could be a tulsi plant, maybe a people tree, whatever it is. Whatever you feel, where you can stay connected to the person. Like, I do this thing where I like to keep the lineage of our tulsi plant. So what I mean by that is, the same plant. I'll collect the seeds, and then I'll grow a new plant, and I'll keep that tulsi lineage sort of like, I don't know. Again, it's just a me thing maybe, right? But I think I really have a fondness for lineages, whether it is a guru shishya parampara, or whether it's your matriarchal or your patriarchal, or whatever the parampara is that you bond with. That force, that life force, continues on, and I think if we prune that connection too quickly, it saps us of our vitality, of our intuition, a lot of things. So you use this opportunity, and I would say now might be a good time to come back to Vedanta full time, like full time as in on a regular basis, I mean, right? Like 15-20 minutes a day also is something that, because this is ultimately the place to go. It frees you from the notion of life and death, not from the experience of it, but from the notion of it. And then when you see it as a notion, then not today, not this week, not next week also, but maybe after a period of time, it will all start appearing beautiful in some way. This whole circle of life will start appearing like a very glorious thing as opposed to a very sad thing. But that objectivity can only come through Vedanta. Yeah. And of course, this exposure to the great Mahatmas and the Gurus and such. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, once again, this is a very sad incident, and obviously it's not easy to deal with. But I think things will get better with time, and yeah, reach out if you need anything. We'll close on that. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Guru Namaha. Hari Om. Om.
Hariom.
Hariom.
Hari.
See, is there anywhere we can read about whatever you were saying?